it. And then I like to cover it up, but I'm going to have to first stop the sound. So just 1 second away, hopefully. Oh, okay, great. Sound's already stopped. Okay, so we're there. We are on live. And so this will go out, Christmas, this will go out both as now live on YouTube, but it will go out as an episode later. So it'll go both. So you kind of get double duty on it. So that's kind of fun. But for anybody who wants to see it sooner, it's there. And you'll be able to go on my channel too and be able to see it, do whatever you want to with it, repost it, whatever you'd like. So if we're all set, I'm just gonna breathe and we're gonna get going. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here. You're so happy that you are here. I'm Kim Sorrelle. I write, I speak, I get to do a lot of fun things in life. My favorite thing to do by far is to meet people, and I get to meet some really fun, wonderful, incredible people. Today, I have Kerisma on my show. First of all, I love your name, Kerisma, and I love what you stand for in life. I love that you are just all about love. You're very much my kindred spirit. And so I'm excited to talk to you about life and love and what you've got going and what you see in the world and what you've been through and how it can impact others. And so, Kerisma, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kim. It's so great to be here. When I saw your show, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I'm about. So I like the kindred spirit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I am so happy that you're here, and I can't wait for people to get to know you because you do have quite a story. I mean, you've been through some things in life, and you're here and you're smiling. And so I love it that you can show people that you can get through some stuff and be smiling on the other end of it. So I'd like for you to start with telling us about 8-year-old Kerisma.
Ooh, 8-year-old Fizzle. Well, yeah, things started pretty rough for me, pretty young, and my parents cared and they tried in their own ways, but we were a lot of intergenerational trauma and my brother had some difficulties that were probably too much for my parents to manage, and I ended up getting kind of like neglected and things were not good for the first 20 years of life. So at 8 I was not doing so well. My cousin actually died right when I was 8, and she was kind of the only person in the world to me that was like, she'd look at me and she would light up with love, right? And I get that, yeah, that real sense of unconditional love, and we just would grin ear to ear to see each other. We didn't get to see each other very often because she lived quite far away, but when we did, it was just like she was my person, she was my person, and everybody else in the world seemed rather, kind of mean and judgmental, and I got called names and I got hit and I got bullied and like you just name it, it was coming at me from every direction, so she was that one person. And then so yeah, it was 8. I was sitting in the when we found out that she had drowned, and I went to a school and I was sitting there with my brother and my older cousin, and I just I thought it should be me for one thing, because I was just like, because I by that time I'd already been convinced that I was bad, and I didn't understand the world. Yeah, um I didn't understand, and it's not like I had a huge relationship with God at the time or anything, but I was just like, it did a world where somebody so good and so full of light and so full of love was taken, and yet all these other people that were so mean were left behind. That the world got really, really dark for me that day, and I think that carried on for a really long time. It impacted me. So yeah, 8-year-old me was pretty sad, pretty alone, and going through things. But from the resilience end, I just was talking about this with a therapist a little while ago. Just like, she was pointing out, like that I was always the one to do the hard things, because I was admiring her for doing something very difficult. And she's like, you've been that person. You've been that person to do the hard things. So somehow throughout all of that, I managed to hold on to who I was. I managed to hold on to my own capacity to love and to want to want to be a force in the world that, like I like to like leave things better than I found them, right? And I don't like to do I'm very careful to not do harm, and I put integrity first, and those kinds of ideals and values, they were with me very, very young. And I did a lot of really hard things to maintain them. So I personally feel rather blessed that somehow through everything that I went through, that it didn't change me. I mean, it certainly led to some challenged ways of coping for a lot of my life or whatever. But the heart of me, the essence of me, the soul of me, that love inside me, it's still been there. I had to lock it down real tight and protect it for a long time. But that essence, that's survived, right?
Mhm. Yeah, 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 man. It's so tough, especially, I mean, 8 years old. I've heard before, I've read several times that at 10 is really when you kind of understand, get a little bit clearer understanding of life and death. And so earlier than that, it's like your mind kind of does whatever it does with life and death. And so that had to be hard already just to even wrap your head around. Like, how do you even wrap an 8-year-old mind around that? Around not just somebody in another class, maybe that you passed in the hallway once in a while or something like that, but somebody that you knew and treasured and loved, and all of a sudden you weren't going to see them again. That I can't imagine the pain of that and the hurt of that, especially like you said, she was your person, she was your cheerleader, she was the one that saw you for you, and all of a sudden there's who's left in your life that sees you that way.
Yeah, and it was unfortunate. Me and her looked a lot alike, and when after we left the schoolyard and we went to my grandma's house, my aunt, her mother, she looked at me and she said, "Why couldn't it be you?" I mean, she was devastated with grief. When you lose an 8-year-old, like when she was devastated with grief, but considering where I had just been the last couple of hours with it all, that was just like, like wow, let's pile this on. And my mom didn't seem to understand how important she had been to me, and so even to this date, she'll not that we've talked for the last 10 years, but she still like, why do you make such a big deal out of it? And it's just like, because she never acknowledged it, and they wouldn't let me. I really wanted to go to the funeral, and they wouldn't let me, which may or may not have been a good decision. I think it was an open castate, and probably that was a very protective thing. But while everybody else was off at the funeral, I was taking the school bus to school, and there was absolutely no emotional support for what had gone through. And you're right, at 8, it's just like I remember riding the bus to school that day. So it's funny, it's one of those flashbulb kind of moments, and it's just like seriously, I know it was a gray day, but like it was just everything was shades of gray, right? It was just like, hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you woke up the next day and you had
Yeah,
to keep
yeah.
going and keep, dealing with whatever. And yeah, with no closure and no support, it had to be so difficult, so hard. Yeah.
Yeah, ironically, she like, I think it was a little while, but in my early teens and later teens and into my late 20s, she was my higher power kind of, I would talk to her, and when I hit a really rough point, at one point, she was where I found forgiveness. I'd gotten into gambling, and oh boy, I was in just, boy, had I thrown my life away quickly with that real quick. And but I found that unconditional love, and because I realized, like she didn't see me the way I saw myself, right? So I had this image of her up there in the stars, and she saw all the struggle, she saw the trying, she saw the beauty, she saw like everything, not just the mistakes and not just the or whatever. And that was probably my first like real understanding of what like unconditional love actually was, like that it was this bigger picture, and seeing you and seeing your heart and your effort and everything that goes into, rather than those like, oh, like, you didn't do the laundry, or you messed up on that bill, or whatever it is, right? Like those tiny little things that we can criticize her for, or the, okay, you spent $6,000 on a credit card gambling. It's just like, she can see the whole story that went into it, and I was like,
Right.
I was like, okay, yeah, right. That's where real forgiveness and unconditional love comes from. It's just like, yeah, all right. Okay. You're still worthy and deserving, and let's get up. Let's get up from this. Let's figure this out, and let's, like, figure out how to because that was the sense I got, was that she wanted better for me, She it didn't it hurt her to see me in pain or struggling, and she wanted the best for me, and just kind of gave me something to kind of work towards.
Yeah, yeah, that's important to have people like that, and it's important that she was still there, that you could still draw on her, that you felt connected, and that because we all need somebody in our corner, right? I mean, that's what can be so hard, is when you feel so alone. Loneliness is a tough thing. It's unhealthy. It's unhealthy for your mind. It's unhealthy for your body, even. It's unhealthy for your soul. I think we were meant to be in community. We're meant to have friends and have people in our life that we can depend on, and that people can depend on us. And when you feel so alone, and you don't feel any of those things, it makes you question everything about life.
It does, I haven't talked about this yet publicly, but so in like, well, I've talked about the breakdown, but in 2018 I had a like kind of a complete breakdown as all the trauma came back, and I'd kind of lost everything, and it's really got brought to my knees. But I met this counselor who was just fantastic, and she's been in my life for the last 8 years, and we met twice a week, and it was the first real experience, like as an adult or whatever, of really having somebody be there the way that you're just describing. And she talked about all those things, and we did a lot of the attachment work, and I had been traumatically independent most of my life, and occasionally connected with partners a bit, but mostly in a kind of a codependent kind of way. And this was the first real modeling of like a really healthy relationship, but somebody that really, really had my back, really, really understood me, and was really, really there for me throughout all of that. And it ended May 9th. She needed to terminate it. She felt like that we had gotten tangled, and I would be better off elsewhere. So it's been so difficult, but I like that we're doing this show today, because the way that I'm navigating that isn't to suppress it or not look at it or try to, like, just focus on the positive like I might have in the past in my life. It's just like I'm really grieving it. Like, this is probably the most meaningful relationship I've ever had in my life in some ways, right? And it's just like, wow, that grief is hard. But as sometimes my mind wants to turn it into something or doubt it or all these different things, I'm just coming back to that love, right? Like what this show's about, like this is just love. Yes, that is what was in that relationship. It was love. It was unconditional love. She had it for me. She modeled it to me. She taught me how to have it for myself. She taught me also how to have it with other people in a new kinds of ways. And it's funny. I had mentioned to her, I said, it's kind of weird because you're not dad, and like Julie was in the stars. She's like, I'm in the stars. And I'm like, you're in the stars? She's like, I'm in the stars, right? And I'm like, okay, all right. So that's where I've been doing, as I feel that grief and that loss. It's just like I put some stars actually up on my wall, and this is like, okay, we're you're always going to be a part of me. And then I just come back to that's what I'm holding on to, is that love. It's never really gonna go away. That's what it was about. And even if it had to end, that's still what it's about. And when I think about her, if she's carrying me, which probably is, she'll be carrying me in her heart, and she'll be sending that love for me, even as she goes on with her life and I go on with my life. And so, I mean, that's kind of it's a bittersweet kind of thing, but it's also such a beautiful thing to so many times in my life when there's been loss. It's been about, like, rejection and or trauma or all these other kinds, and everything gets distorted, and you kind of end up losing more than you needed to, because of the experience of loss itself, right? Whereas it's like, okay, yeah, this is probably, one of the hardest losses I've ever had, but the fact that I get to hold on to the love is just amazing, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. It's so true. I love the way you're saying all of this, and I love your attitude about it. And I can totally tell that what you're saying is what you mean. It's not like your demeanor changes. Like this is what you're saying is what you mean, which says to me the last 8 years have had a huge impact on your life because I'm sure there was a time that you would just be under the covers, not being able to breathe, like this, such devastation that you couldn't look at it objectively and look for the good that happened and will continue to happen because of those 8 years instead of just the loss of it. So go you. I mean, it's pretty impressive the way
Yeah,
that
it's
you're looking at it.
this journal last night, and I was like, okay, like this is kind of the hard part because right now we feel that real physical loss. Like, you're not there in the same way that you have been, but I see that I'm transitioning to where she's actually really inside me. She's integrated in, like, I almost see it like a tree with roots, like it's all throughout me. And so as I move through that physical loss phase, I'm gonna get more and more in touch with all of the ways that she actually is with me in all these other ways, right? So this is probably the roughest spot of just like that actual physical loss to moving through to like how we rediscover what is all still there.
Mm, yeah, that's so beautifully said. If I've had people in my life that have come and gone, right? I think we all do. You move out of a neighborhood and you think you're going to stay in touch and you don't, and you have close friends from school, but then school's over, so maybe you don't remain that close to friends, or for whatever reason, we kind of have, they say friends through different seasons, friends for different reasons, and then friends that are a lifetime. And so but there is something wonderful in what you just said about people that you love in life that uh, they don't really ever leave you. I like it that you said it like that. Like they really don't. Like you learn something from everybody that you come in contact with, right? Consciously, unconsciously, subconsciously, whatever. You learn from people. And so part of them remains with you. And the things that you learned, like I can even think of a few people that I've known over the years and the things that I learned from them that I've carried with me that are definitely part of who I am today. And I love the way you're putting it, the tree and the roots and it just makes so much sense that that's what it's like.
Yeah, yeah, right. Which
Yeah.
isn't to say that I'm not curled up in a ball crying sometimes,
Yeah, of course.
but that too, that now that becomes like it's a way to honor, and even the fact that I can see this loss differently than things that had happened to me in the past is part of the whole beautiful experience of it all, right?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Well, and so okay, so now you're in school. I want to hear
Yeah.
about this.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so anyway, for me, she probably saw this coming along a lot longer than I did, and I think she was trying to put things back on track, and they weren't. But anyway, so for me, it was like rather kind of quickly, right? We were talking about what things look like next January, and then all of a sudden we were like talking about termination, and then all of a sudden it was like we had 2 sessions left, and so I had always, when we first started working together, after my breakdown, I was talking about like all these things that I had lost and that I had been working towards, and they just seemed impossible. And she put it on a whiteboard, and I was here, and all this stuff was there, and here was all the logs along the road that were in my way, and it put perspective because it's like that stuff wasn't gone. There was just stuff I needed to work through to get through. Anyway, one conversation we had, I was talking about all the barriers to me going back to school, like money and other kinds of things, right? And she was like, "Well, there's a lot more ways to do it than that, right?" And at the time, I was really needing to work on the trauma material and other thing like that. But I pocketed that conversation. I was like, I want to, when I'm doing better, I want to come back to that conversation and ask her about that because she's always been one to she doesn't do the work for me, but she points me in the right direction, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of preconceived notions I had about barriers turned out to be, not really what they were. So I was like, okay, I'll come back to that. So anyway, this is ending with her. I'm like devastated, and I've been doing heavy duty trauma work for like basically 8 years, 90 minutes twice a week. So like that was a majority of a lot of my energy was going into that. Not that I wasn't also really working hard at building up other things in my life or writing books and stuff like that, right? But it was very much all focused kind of like around that growth and that healing and IFS, internal parts work, and all the rest of that. So I was anyway, it's like, oh, this is ending. It's like, what now? The story is hilarious, Kim, because it's like I've gotten a lot better with my finances the last couple of years too, right? So, I have Apple Music, and I got the monthly, 10.99 charge on my thing, right? And it always annoys me because it's like I love my playlist, so I continue, like I like to chop those monthly bills, right? It's like, all right, they got me, right? Because I don't want to give up my playlist. But I was just looking to see if the annual price was any better than the monthly price, right? And I noticed there was a student price, right? And it was half the price, right? And I was like, oh, and this isn't my finest moment, but I was curious if I could fake being a student to get it. It was just a thought,
Yeah.
but and it was like, no, no, not really. So like literally 2 hours later, I had reapplied to continue on with my Associates of Arts degree, right? And synchronicity, wow, it was amazing. It was like it was the Thursday, the summer semester started the following Monday, right? And the cutoff actually to apply for that semester was the Friday, the very next day. So it was just got in under the wire, and it just, I think this was totally meant to happen, right? And kicking down doors, so to speak, like opening things, like, I've gotten so much better at accessing resources and following all of the fact that there used to be, like to do one thing, required you to do 10 things used to mean I couldn't do it. But now I'm just like, bring it on, right? I was like, okay, bang, 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 and accessing these resources, and it turns out like the funding that's available and all the rest of this is not only totally doable to get my Associate of Arts degree, but I'm going to go on and get my master's degree, right? Because she's right, there was so much more available, and everything that I've learned in the last 8 years about accessing resources, I'm using this, that, and the other thing, and good to go. And I do love learning. So, I only need two classes to finish my associates, and one of them is cognitive psych, and I'm in that. And I was for 2 weeks, I was like, what's the grade? Because I did my midterm, right? And I'm like, it's been 11 years since I've been back at school. So even though I knew I did well, I was just kind of like, well, I want that. I want to verify this. And yeah, I got like 79 out of 80. And I even knew which one I had gotten wrong. And so it's like, just my self-worth isn't dependent on that. But those are like bonus things, right? Like, they're like seeing that balloon in the sky, right? And I'm just like, okay, like awesome, we're on track, and I'm being a high maintenance student for in my other class. It's a visual communication one that I took more for interest in stuff like that. But it's also learning, like there's so much different kind of learning going on. And then the last course I have to take to get my associates is actually is a lab science, as I called the stupid lab science for every time I was in school, right? And it's obviously got put off to the very last, but I found the chemistry of cooking. And as a wellness coach who's got several certificates in nutrition and stuff like that, chemistry of cooking might not be, like that might be all right, because I can apply that actually to some of the work I already do. So I'm like, all right, okay, okay. So yeah, it's pretty wild, like, and what a great, I think younger me, like this would have been just like okay, well, I'm going to focus here and I'm going to ignore all the pain and the loss and everything with that. I'm going to use this to like avoid what is going on. And this isn't that. This is like, yes, that is ending, or no, well, it's ended now. That has ended, and this is what we're going to do now, right? Because I thought I need something meaningful. It's really my work is meaningful, my writing, my books, but all of that stuff is fairly independent, right? And I thought I think getting around people, doing something community oriented, and something with meaning and purpose, and working towards other kinds of things. So it was really part of my own wellness plan. Both mentally and emotionally and socially and all the rest of that. So it's been it's not about the Apple Music discount at all, although I do grin ear to ear when I see that lower price.
That's good. Oh, funny. Yeah, well, that's fantastic. And yeah, oh my gosh, the chemistry of cooking. How great is that that you found that? That's perfect, perfect for you.
Mm.
So tell me about writing.
Um, well, I wrote a lot in my teens, and my teens were pretty messed up for me, and I was suicidal, even tried it a few times. So, but writing was, I think it's always been a little bit of a gift of mine. And I always loved English too, right? And I could just do really well in English classes without, I was the only one like really, excited about Shakespeare. Everybody else is going like, what is this? What is this? Right? I'm like, what, don't you get it? He's hilarious, right? It's like- so, but, so writing and journaling goes way back, but because it was a lot of like, often I was writing because I didn't have anybody else to talk to and stuff like that. It was also very painful. And when I was a teenager, I wanted to write a book. These books are not the books I thought I would write. But I back then we had typewriters for one thing. So I always owned one of those black typewriters because that was part of my writing dream, right? What are those things called? I forget. And then so it was like my idea back then was like, okay, well, I'll need to have enough money to take a couple of years off work so that I can just, focus on writing this book. I'm probably supposed to live in a cabin somewhere or something like that. And then, of course I got kicked out of the house early and then it was all about keeping a roof over my head. And that was like, just working full time was about all I could manage. And then I forget, probably in my 30s or Dragon's Peak came along and you could dictate books, right? And I was like, oh, I really thought, oh, this has got possibilities. But um it was really expensive when it first came out, right? Like I think it was like $1,000 or something like that. It was just very cost prohibitive, and I've always been a little bit challenged that way. So I was like, no. Eventually I got like a bootleg copy, but by then life was just full on and it didn't happen. And then um, I guess after my breakdown, I mostly had to focus on like the real basics. I do Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's like we shelter I maintained the whole time, but then we're just building and building and building and building, right? So I got to the point where I had learned how to use a lot of the different assistive technologies. I already like knew how to dictate into my phone and all kinds of stuff like that. And I came home from a coaching session one day and I thought, this light sits, I coach a lot using metaphors. I do it in my own healing work and I do it with clients because we have these old outdated constructs, right? And they need something beyond a word to replace them. They need a whole new construct. So I find metaphors like really helpful for that. So I'd come home and once again I'd use the light switch myth, this idea that change is an instant, and it's not linear, and it's not about making a decision. It's actually about like practice and breaking it down into small steps and slowly and sometimes some setbacks. And it's this whole, so I'd been using the metaphor again. And I thought, wow, this is really re universal. I don't think I've worked with one client that didn't have that weird construct about change that I had used to have too. So I thought, maybe I should share this in a book because then I could reach more people than I'm reaching with my client business, right? And nowadays with all the self-publishing options and all the available assistive technology and stuff like that, it was just like, okay, and I had the time, because I was off work healing and so I was just like, okay. And then so I went right back to English grade 8 or whatever when they teach you about making an outline, right? It's like, so I made the outline and then like I put in what I wanted. I did the first half of the book first and then for the next couple of months I would wake up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. It's gotta have this. It's gotta have this. Right. The
Yeah.
second half of the book with all the resources and tools I wanted to share came really from like, basically 2 o'clock in the morning. But again, another thing I've learned later in life is when I have these creative ideas, like, I wake up and I write them down. Well, I don't write them down. I talk to my phone because I don't even have to turn the light on, right? I just like get it down, right? And
Mhm.
then even if I can't work on it the next day or that month, it's there ready, right? Like the sapphic holiday romance that I wrote at Christmas, which was my second book. It was a dream I'd had like 2 years prior, right? And I thought I was gonna have the next best Netflix movie, right? Because we're a lot of us had been dying for a little bit more unique characters in the Hallmark movies, right? And I'm a fan. So when I realized that as a nobody, I wasn't going to get in front of anybody as far as a movie goes, I threw it in a drawer. But after I had published my first book, it was November, and I was like, oh, you kind of have the whole book written, right? Yeah, because I had dreamt it in such detail, like I had full characters and full plot and everything. So I pulled it out as a just kind of like this was my holiday from the main work, and published the sapphic romance like rather quickly, and it was pretty popular. It's still like, it's funny, I still see people picking it up like we're in the summertime, and it's a Christmas love story. So like, it's hilarious, but I do laugh too because that's human nature, right? The light switch myth, contemporary approaches to creating lasting changes. There's a lot of value in there, right? I see it as a very valuable resource, right? And I want to see it get in the right hands. But I think a lot of people would rather take the ice cream cone, so to speak, the happy ending novella, because like that makes you feel good. The other one makes you kind of look at yourself and look at life. Whereas this one is just like, oh yay, right, happy ending, okay. So it's like, all right, how does it, like, oh, you can only have the ice cream cone if you're willing to eat like the proper meal too.
Yeah, right. You gotta have the meat, and then you can
Yeah,
get to the dessert.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Very interesting.
The
So, yeah, go ahead.
just to so the companion journal that I wrote. So in chapter 7 of the Light Switch Myth is an exercise, and it's really meaningful to me because it was actually something that my counselor suggested I do, which was at the end of the night, where I often had a habit of laying there in that threat mode, like, going through my day with like what I'd done wrong, what was going to come back at me, worrying about, like what might go wrong tomorrow, or what was coming down the pike. And it's just that impacts your sleep, which impacts your efficacy the next day, and it's just this nasty cycle. So she was getting me to ask myself some kind of questions about, like, what did you do today that took courage, or what did you do today that was like really hard for you? Not what you might think was hard, but like what I thought was hard, and it was kind of like this way to start to develop a new lens towards my own life, right? And actually start to give kind of some recognition to the things that I was doing, as opposed to focusing on the things that I wasn't doing, and the beauty of it is, the smaller the thing that I could give myself credit for, the more it all grew and bloomed. And like, it literally rewired my brain from one that was predominantly critical and threat based to one that was so much more compassionate and validating and attuned, right? And created new neural pathways in my head to be able to look at my life, in ways that were, I could actually see all these ways that I was showing up for myself, which just changed quality of life so much. So I made the companion journal, and I made it black and white because I wanted it to be um, as affordable as possible. Because I still give it away to a lot of people wherever possible, because it's, you don't need the journal. You can just ask yourselves those questions at the end of the day and use any kind of notepad. But sometimes when things are packaged in a nice little thing, right, we just have to answer the questions that are already on the page. I like to make things as easy as possible for people. But yeah, like that self-gratitude practice, that was life-changing in my life. It was probably like one of the most significant exercises that I personally did over the last 8 years, that changed the relationship that I had with myself, right? And
Mhm.
people are always kind of like, well, they want to, but they don't know how to, and they don't know where to start to, right? So I was like, well, here's this tool.
I love it. I love it. So if you're sitting across from somebody and you're talking to them about that, about the importance of it, why to do it, and exactly how, or even different ideas on how, what do you say to them?
Well, it's funny how many people are really resistant to writing, right? So the I run different groups, and I hand the books out, and then people don't do it. So I often then what I do is I incorporate into the groups is like I will open a lot of my groups with one or two of the questions from the book so that we're just doing it in practice, right?
Mhm.
So whatever the barrier is, like, if journaling is just like not going to happen for you at this point in your life, just like even pause for a second somewhere in your day and just like, ask yourself like, hey, what was one little thing I did today that took courage, Or another thing our society sort of it lacks we often don't give ourselves credit for the things we maintain, It's just like last year, I learned how to have a glass of water every morning before I have my cup of coffee. But I've moved on now. I've moved on. I'm trying to do a 5K run. So, but like what if we stopped and we're just like gave ourselves a second to recognize, wow, I'm still drinking water, right? Or I replaced regular milk with non-dairy milk, or like what I go for a walk, or I call a friend once a week, or now when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I actually take a few deep breaths, whatever it is like that we had worked on before. If we stop now, especially when we're feeling overwhelmed or frustrated or like we suck, it's just like, wait a minute, look at where you've been. Look at the things you already tried to change and what are you still maintaining, right? Because that also is going to fuel, like, I mean, it's a counselor trick 101 to connect you to, they'll ask you like, well, what worked last time, right?
Right.
It's like we can do that for ourselves. It's like, hey, okay, well, if I remember learning to drink more water seemed impossible when I first started, and I really struggled to do it. But eventually I actually did it, and now I do it so automatically I don't even think about it. And there's so much in that itself for us to draw on in the things that maybe we're still struggling with or we want for ourselves or that are feeling like, quite out of reach.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it's so true. Like giving yourself credit for where you were and where you are now, and the things that have brought you there, the things that you have done, the changes that have happened in your life, because they're easy to forget when it becomes routine. It's easy to forget when you're in a whole different place. That wow, you used to be in this other place, and you were able to bring yourself out of it. You were able to make whatever little tweaks, whatever little changes, whatever mindsets, whatever it happened that brought you from there to here, that are things that you should feel good about, that you've accomplished, that you've done it, like you've been somewhere and now you're someplace else. I mean, that alone is a victory.
Yeah, and when you start to recognize that and be able to see it, it like what it does is it builds confidence because things that you stop seeing like that everything's impossible and you start seeing, oh, like, oh, wait a minute, I am capable. Like, okay, all right, maybe this isn't going to happen overnight. Maybe it's going to really suck for a while or be a struggle or whatever. But you know what? I bet eventually I'm going to get there. I bet it's just a matter of time and patience rather than it being something that is like completely impossible, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, so good. And kind of going back to something you talked about earlier, you sort of just kind of said quickly was about loving yourself, about learning how to do that, or being shown your value and whatever. And so I want to know, how do you approach self-love? Because self-love is like this term that I think is used in a weird way. Like some people hear self-love and they cringe, right? It's not like, oh, self-love, peace, joy, happiness, self-love. And but it shouldn't be that way. I just believe that to really love others, to really love, period, you need to recognize how special you are, how you are created to be exactly who you are, and how wonderful and incredible that is, that you are unlike any other person ever or ever will be, that you are one of a kind, and to appreciate that and appreciate yourself. And I love the way you talk about the gratitude and seeing the good, because you need to be able to see the good in order to love yourself, because
Yeah,
otherwise,
I think
how do you? So, yeah. What
yeah,
do
I
you
think gratitude's thrown around like self-love, right? And when I'm talking about gratitude, it's self-gratitude. And it's just like it's the same thing. I think our gratitude toward it's great. I have a roof over my head. Okay. It's absolutely great. I live in BC and it's absolutely great. There's so many things that are just, I'm grateful for. But honestly, if I haven't really learned how to get good with me and be grateful to myself and understand all of that, all those rest of those gratitudes, they're going to be a bypassing, you know? They're going to be a bypassing for a whole inside, you know? And they're going to be about an external metric of like, oh, I should feel grateful. Whereas when we tie deep into connecting with ourselves and having that real self-love and real self-gratitude towards ourselves, then when we have it, the love or the gratitude for other things, it's got a depth to it, it's got a quality to it that is inclusive, you know, and starts with that solid foundation of ourselves, as opposed to when it's not there with ourselves, it's always going to be a little problematic, whether or not we can see that, particularly, you know, as you probably have experienced within relationships. So like, yeah, self-love, um one, I always thought it was like, you know, kind of like a decision, right? And that it was a failure on my part that I didn't, right? You know, but no, I had internalized things, you know, that needed real work. And recently I always used to think, because I'd hear a lot about, you know, put the sticky notes on your mirror and do the affirmations, and it used to make me angry because I had such a trauma history. It's like, you know, like that's not going to do it, you know? Like that's not going to address the stuff that is deep inside, right? You know, it's not going to magically heal that. So I was a little bit like, you know, hard on the whole affirmation movement. But recently I listened to a couple of Louise Hay's books because I actually always really liked her loving the different parts of your body as far as a wellness approach, you know, and not inviting disease kind of thing. But I really got into listening to her, and she does talk about affirmations. It's true, but she doesn't talk about them as the answer. She actually talks about doing that deep healing work with somebody who's qualified, you know, and in addition, you do the affirmations. And I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess I've been being a little hard on you my whole life," right? Because that's, again, we sometimes, as a society, we take what we want, and the real meat and potatoes of it gets left behind. So like, yeah, she had done an incredible amount of work on herself. Her clients, all of her work talks about people doing that deep healing work, you know, as a way to come to that place of true love. And I guess for me, you know, I had that history of self-loathing and all the rest of that from having internalized how I was treated by other people, but and then unrealistic ideas about what it meant to change that. But again, too, I really, right before my breakdown, I thought I was thriving, you know, and I guess in some ways I was, because I had a successful coaching business. I had lost 80 pounds. I was so fit, you know, I was like 160 pounds, and I was ripped in like a very nice feminine way. And I was finally become a vegan. I was married, you know, I was just feeling like the top of my game, and everything fell apart. And all the work, the 25 years of work that I had put into self-worth crumbled, because you know what? It was all dependent on doing, you know, that, and even I had 14 years clean, and um it was conditional, you know. All of the love that I had for myself, it was conditional on the fact that I was, you know, doing this and doing that and succeeding in this way, you know. And so it wasn't actually a solid foundation, and it was a foundation built on trauma, you know, and making up for and trying to get rid of things, and you know, fixing myself, and being somebody that was worthy and deserving of love. And you know what the breakdown taught me, in you know, I wish that lesson could have come along a little easier, but that's
Right.
life, was, you know what, that I was always worthy and deserving. And I actually needed to go back, like, to a very little kid, you know, that, and that 8-year-old, and actually the 2-year-old, and the teenager, and even the 18 years I had spent in addiction prior to the 14 years I got clean, and go back to all those parts of myself and understand that I had actually been doing my best, and that, you know, like, that there was so much that I was dealing with, and I was doing my best, and But regardless of the decisions I made or the mistakes I made or the behaviors I was doing or my level of functioning or whatever, I was still deserving of love, you know? I was
Mhm.
worthy every step of the way. So to be able to kind of go back and meet yourself with that and really come to understand that love was not conditional on any of those kinds of things. That's what I think like real self-love is about. That's the perspective part. The action part to me is prioritizing the relationship with myself and really learning how to take care of myself, you know, and that's across the board. And again, I speak about dynamic balance in my book because we're not going to be able to get anything perfectly. So, you know, and if for me, holistic wellness is like there's a lot of slices of the pie. So sometimes I work on this and sometimes I work on that. And this area might be, you know, not that great, but we'll get to it eventually, right? You know, we're focusing over here and but you know, I keep all of those places in my mind that I'm deserving of it. And the places where I'm falling short, I can meet myself with love. I can go, you know what? I know you'd like that, and one day you're going to get there, right? You know, you're doing your best. It's okay, right? You know, like I might have contributed somehow to the ending that I was talking about earlier in the show, you know, and it's just like, but if I did, it's okay. You know, I'm still doing my best. I was showing up. I was trying and all the rest of that. So like, you know, and I don't mean trying from that external metric kind of measure of success. I just mean, you know, my heart is has always been in things and I do my best, you know. Hindsight's a dangerous thing because often we'll go back and think that we should have done better and it's like no no no, you know, I didn't have this information or this capacity or this tolerance or this, you know. I was I really had a lot of regret and being kind of hard on myself about the fact that it, you know, took to my late 40s and stuff like that to start to do some of the work that I did around healing and stuff. But the truth is, you know what? I couldn't have done it before I did it because I this is where I finally had the right support. I finally had the right capacity. I had finally established the right kind of security within myself. It's like all this stuff had to come together for me to be able to do what I was doing, you know? So
Mhm.
this is and then when I notice myself being critical or conditional, it's like it's not that that ever completely goes away, but I can acknowledge it. I go, okay, yeah, yeah, all right, I see, I know, like this is something we know how to do that way, but you know, and I hear you and thank you for trying, but we're gonna try it this way. I make a choice. I make a choice. I have that awareness and I pause and then I I don't judge the judge. I come in and I go, okay, yeah, but I I'm really committed to offering myself unconditional love across the board, you know, even when I can't be unconditional, right? It's just like, okay, you're worthy, deserving, you always would, you know, and a lot of my energy goes into that self-care right now because I grew up in an environment of neglect, not intentional neglect, but there was um neglect from really lack of understanding on their part and stuff and even, you know, a lot of it just from that age like, you know, some of us emotional awareness, what is that? Right? It's
Right.
like so, but yeah, so I like, you know, part of my identity is knowing what my values are and what they've always been. And some have changed because they weren't really mine, and some go way back. So I have this identity. And then my my upgraded understanding of healing since you know, the last 8 years since the breakdown, that it's probably one of the biggest gifts that my therapist gave me was that, you know, wholeness isn't about eliminating parts of ourselves, you know? It's not about fixing parts. It's actually about learning how to be in relationship with them. Just like we would
Mm,
the difficult people in our lives that we're not going to get rid of, you know? It's just like, and then because when we're trying to fix and eliminate and all the rest, that's gonna create inner turmoil, right? Because those parts are gonna fight back, right? Like, you
right.
know, but whereas when we learn how to like be with them unconditionally without necessarily letting them run the show, you know, where you still using our wise mind to make the decisions about things, but that's where harmony comes from and an inner peace, right? And that inner peace and harmony, that's what um sort of creates that self-love in my feeling, right? Because it's like, yeah, okay, you know, like I can thank myself for these parts that have been so problematic because, but you know, but then there's this within the system, there's harmony, and that harmony then equates to um, quality of life and improved connection with other people too. Because I'm also in that able to meet a lot of my own needs. So I'm not walking around like, just hoping somebody will validate me or acknowledge me or overly sensitive because you didn't understand why that dream was so important to me. It's
Right.
like, or I'm not, like, because I'm able to acknowledge my own needs. I'm able to meet them a lot of the time. And I'm able to, like, if I can have that compassion for myself and understand, like, oh, I could be a little critical, or some days I have less tolerance, or, all of the rest of that stuff, I can also then apply those same things to you. But my story, I could always apply that to you, but never to me. But now learning how to treat myself that way and see myself that way and be in relationship with myself that way, that to me, that, oh, I don't know, I just would like to hand that out like candy to everybody.
Right. Yeah, no kidding. Well, you kind of are in your book, so that's good. And when you talk, so that's good because yeah, it's an interesting thing because I think we've been, I don't know, sold it a different way. And when you come to realize how important it is to recognize that you are who you are and you make choices and they're not always the greatest ones, but you try and you get back up the next morning and you try harder and you try again. And to cut yourself some slack sometimes, I think is so important to forgive yourself for what you think you've done wrong or where you think you failed and get excited, celebrate when you do things good. And like you said earlier, to recognize what did I do good today? Like, what am I doing good? What am I constantly doing? What did I promise myself I do and I'm still doing? And all those things just are so important. And I love the way you put it. You just put it so beautifully. I appreciate that about you a lot. The way that you uh, are so open to talk about the journey that you've been through and are just so willing to share because lots of us have been through crap. Lots of people have been through crap. And it's always so good, I think, to see somebody on the other end of things to realize, wow, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I can get through whatever it is that I'm going through. Life can be different if I want it to be different than it is today. I can grow and change. And sometimes I think that is hard to give yourself and others the grace to grow and change. And I've always thought, Charisma, I've always thought that, there's all these books about babies, right? How to raise a baby, what to expect before when you're expecting, even before the baby's born. And then toddler years and adolescence and, dealing with teens, whatever. And then it kind of ends. But it's like, well, where's the book on your 20s? And where's the book on your 30s? And I would have loved a book about my 40s, like because we change, because each time of our life is different and we are evolving and changing and growing. And so I love the way you put it. I love the way you write. I love the way you present. I love who you are. And I love that you have such a heart for other people. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing to help other people, that you're getting things out in the world. I so appreciate you to more than I can say. How can people find you? How can they get your work?
Um, well, Google search is a great place to start, but towardswellness.ca, and going back to school, I haven't updated it in a bit, so it doesn't have my latest children book, Chrissy and the Fireflies, on there yet. But towardswellness.ca, you can sign up for a newsletter, you can reach out to me. Some of the links to the books are on there, the coaching is on there, and I'll say to your crowd, as I say to many crowds, if the only reason you can't get my books is because of the price, please just email me. I provide free PDFs as part of my accessibility policy to those that, like, if cost is why you can't get it, just let me know and I'll send you a free PDF because I'd rather see them get into the hands. That being said, I love it when people buy books. I jump up and down. It's like, woohoo! But
Yeah.
Yeah, so towardswellness.ca is probably the best way to connect. But if you find me on any of the different social media platforms or anywhere like that, just reach out. I'm very approachable, and I always have time to share a few words with anybody who's looking to connect.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And of course, we'll have all that in the show notes too. So if you didn't write anything down, you'll be able to get a hold of Charisma in a bunch of different ways. And so thank you again. Thanks for being here today. And thanks for all that you're doing. And keep fighting the fight, keep going after it. And congratulations on school. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, this has
Yeah.
really been a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, thank you to everybody for joining us today. And if you know anybody that this episode would be great for them to hear, please pass it on, subscribe, pass it on, share the love, share the joy, share the advice, the incredible advice that was delivered today, and get a hold of Charisma. We'll have everything in the show notes where you can buy books, where you can get her stuff, where you can find her and get on her newsletter list and all of that. And thanks for being here for us, for all of us. And I just want to say that I pray that until we see each other again, that you live with an open heart and that you live your love loud. All right, there's the episode.
All right,
Okay, I'm
awesome.
going to stop live streaming. Goodbye, YouTube.